Can I ask you something? Have you ever felt like the harder you try to keep someone in your life, the further they seem to drift away? You send the first message. You apologize, even when it wasn't entirely your fault. You make time for them. You overthink every conversation. You do everything you can, hoping they'll finally choose you. But somehow, it never feels like enough. If that's where you are right now, I want you to stay with me. Because I don't think the problem is that you're not lovable. I think you've been trying to earn something that should never have required earning in the first place. And once you understand why, your relationships will never feel the same again. Maybe you're not losing them. Maybe you're losing yourself. Before we talk about anyone else, I want to talk about you. Because I know how easy it is to blame yourself. You think, maybe I didn't try hard enough. Maybe I should have texted more. Maybe I should have been more patient. Maybe if I become a better person, they'll finally stay. Can I tell you something that took me a long time to understand? When you're constantly asking yourself how to keep someone, you stop asking a much more important question. Why do you believe you have to convince someone to stay? Those are two completely different questions, and one of them changes your life. I once read the story of a young man who spent years trying to save a relationship. Every time they argued, he apologized first. Not because he was always wrong, because he was terrified of losing her. He stopped seeing his friends. He changed his hobbies. He canceled plans whenever she needed him. Little by little, his entire life began revolving around one person. One evening, after another argument, she looked at him and quietly said, "I don't know who you are anymore." When I first read that story, I thought she was being unfair. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something painful. She wasn't saying he wasn't good enough. She was saying he had disappeared. He had spent so much time becoming who he thought she wanted, that he forgot who he actually was. And I wonder, how many of us have done exactly the same thing? Maybe not in a romantic relationship. Maybe with friends. Maybe at work. Maybe even with our own families. We slowly trade pieces of ourselves, hoping people will love us more. But here's the strange part. The more we abandon ourselves, the harder it becomes for anyone else to truly know us. Because they're no longer meeting the real person. They're meeting the version that's trying desperately to be accepted. And that's exhausting. Not only for you, but eventually for them too. So maybe the goal isn't learning how to make people stay. Maybe the goal is becoming someone you never have to abandon again. The harder you chase, the more you forget your own worth. Can I ask you another question? When was the last time you did something simply because it made you happy? Not because someone expected it. Not because you were afraid of disappointing them. Not because you hoped they'd appreciate you more. Just because it felt right. For a lot of people, it's surprisingly hard to answer that question. Because somewhere along the way, they stopped living from their own values and started living for other people's reactions. Maybe you've done this before. You check your phone, hoping they'll text first. When they don't, you tell yourself they're probably just busy. Hours go by. Then a whole day. Eventually they reply with 2 words. And somehow, those 2 words determine whether you have a good day or a terrible one. Think about that for a second. Your peace is now being controlled by someone who may not even realize it. That's an exhausting way to live. Not because they're a bad person, but because you've unknowingly handed them a responsibility that was never theirs. You asked them to decide whether you feel worthy, and no human being can carry that responsibility forever. I remember reading about a woman who spent years trying to be the perfect partner. She never complained, never said no. She always adjusted her schedule. She always put his needs first. Her friends admired how devoted she was. From the outside, Their relationship looked almost perfect. But one day, she admitted something that broke my heart. She said, "I don't even know what I enjoy anymore." Imagine hearing yourself say that. Not, "I lost my relationship," but, "I lost myself." That's a different kind of pain. Because relationships can end. Jobs can change. People can walk away. But if you lose yourself, where do you go from there? This is something I wish more people talked about. We spend so much time learning how to attract people, how to communicate better, how to make relationships last. But almost nobody teaches us how to remain ourselves while loving someone else. And that might be the most important skill of all. Because love should never require you to abandon the person you worked so hard to become. A healthy relationship doesn't ask you to shrink. It gives you room to grow. It doesn't make you question your worth every day. It reminds you that your worth existed long before you met them. That's why I think one of the biggest mistakes we make is believing that being chosen will finally make us feel complete. It won't. Because if you don't already believe you're enough, no amount of love from another person will convince you otherwise. And this is where an ancient idea completely changed the way I see relationships. Epictetus once taught that we suffer most when we become attached to things we cannot control. At first, I thought he was talking about possessions, or money, or success. But the older I get, the more I think he was also talking about people. You can love someone deeply, care for them sincerely, be grateful they're part of your life. But you cannot force them to stay. You cannot force them to understand you. And you cannot build your identity around choices that were never yours to make. The strange thing is, when you finally stop chasing, you stop acting from fear. You stop trying to perform. You stop trying to become whoever you think they want. And for the first time in a long time, the real you finally has room to breathe. Maybe that's what confidence really looks like. Not making people stay, but knowing you'll still be okay, even if they don't. But here's the question most people never ask. If chasing people pushes them away, why do we keep doing it again and again? The answer has very little to do with love, and almost everything to do with fear. You're not chasing love. You're chasing reassurance. Can I tell you what I think is really happening? I don't think you're chasing that person. I think you're chasing the feeling they give you. There's a difference. When they text you, you feel important. When they compliment you, you feel attractive. When they choose you, you feel enough. And without realizing it, your confidence slowly becomes something they control. That's why silence hurts so much. It's not the silence itself. It's the story your mind starts telling. Maybe they're losing interest. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I'm just not enough. The strange thing is, most of the time, none of those stories are true. But our minds don't like uncertainty. So they fill the silence with fear. A few years ago, I heard a therapist say something that stayed with me. She said, "People don't chase because they're weak. They chase because they're afraid of being forgotten." That sentence made me stop and think. Because I realized, almost everyone has felt that fear at some point. Not just in relationships. Think about work. How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no? Because you were afraid people would stop valuing you? Or with friends? How many times have you laughed at something that wasn't even funny? Just because you wanted to fit in? Or with family? How many times have you stayed silent? Because keeping the peace felt safer than speaking the truth? Different situations. Same fear. The fear that if people see the real you, they might leave. So you start editing yourself. You become easier, quieter, more agreeable, less honest. Little by little, you stop asking, "What do I really think?" And you start asking, "What do they want me to say?" That's one of the saddest trades we can make. Because every time you hide a part of yourself, You teach yourself that who you really are isn't enough. I know someone who spent years trying to be liked by everyone at work. He volunteered for every extra task, stayed late almost every evening, never challenged anyone's opinion. Everyone described him as easy to work with. But one day, he admitted something surprising. He said, "I don't think anyone actually knows me." Imagine that. Being surrounded by people every day, and still feeling invisible. That's the price of constantly performing. People may like the version of you that never says no, but they never get the chance to know the real you. And here's something I've learned the hard way. The people who are meant to stay don't stay because you exhausted yourself trying to earn their love. They stay because they feel safe being themselves, and they allow you to do the same. That's what real connection looks like. Not perfection. Not constant agreement. Not endless sacrifice. Just two people who don't have to pretend. When I first came across the writings of Epictetus, one idea stood out more than anything else. He believed that freedom begins the moment you stop depending on things outside yourself for your peace. At first, I thought that sounded impossible. How could anyone stop caring what people think? But over time, I realized he wasn't asking us to stop loving people. He was asking us to stop abandoning ourselves in order to be loved. And those are two very different things. Maybe that's the freedom you've been looking for all along. If anything you've heard today feels uncomfortably familiar, you're not the only one. I'd love to hear from you. What's one moment when you realized you were trying too hard to keep someone in your life? Share it in the comments. You never know. Your story might help someone who's quietly going through the same thing. And if these conversations help you see yourself a little more clearly, consider subscribing. Every week, we explore timeless wisdom through real-life struggles, so you can build stronger relationships, greater confidence, and a calmer mind. Now, there's one final piece of this puzzle we haven't talked about yet. Why is it that the moment you stop chasing, people often start coming back? The moment you stop chasing, everything begins to change. Have you ever noticed something strange? The moment you stop checking your phone every 5 minutes, they finally text you. The moment you stop trying so hard to impress people, they seem more interested in being around you. The moment you stop begging for someone's attention, they suddenly start noticing your absence. For the longest time, I thought this was just a coincidence. But I don't think it is anymore. Because when you stop chasing, something much more important happens. You stop chasing yourself away. Think about that for a second. When you're constantly trying to win someone's approval, you're not really present. You're watching every word you say, every message you send, every expression on their face. You're not enjoying the conversation. You're analyzing it. You're not building a relationship. You're managing anxiety. And people can feel that. Not because they're judging you, but because desperation has a way of changing how we show up. It makes us over-explain, over-apologize, over-give, overthink. I used to know someone who couldn't stand being alone. The moment one relationship ended, he rushed into another. Not because he was deeply in love, because silence terrified him. One day I asked him, "When was the last time you spent a weekend by yourself, and actually enjoyed it?" He laughed. Then he got quiet. Finally he said, "I honestly don't remember." That answer stayed with me. Because I realized, a lot of people aren't afraid of losing someone else. They're afraid of being left alone with themselves. Maybe that's why we chase so hard. Not because the other person is extraordinary, but because we're trying to escape the emptiness we haven't learned to face. And here's what changed my perspective. One summer, I met an elderly man at a small park near my neighborhood. Every morning, he sat on the same bench with a book in his hands. Sometimes people stopped to talk to him. Sometimes no one did. But he always looked completely at peace. One morning, I finally asked him, "Don't you ever get lonely sitting here by yourself?" He smiled, closed his book, and said something I've never forgotten. When you enjoy your own company, you stop begging other people to fill the silence. That sentence hit me harder than he probably realized, because I thought about all the times I had confused loneliness with the inability to enjoy my own life. Those aren't the same thing. Being alone doesn't automatically make you unhappy, but believing your happiness depends on someone else's presence almost always will. That's why I think the healthiest relationships begin long before you meet the right person. They begin the day you stop abandoning your own life. The day you start reading that book you've been putting off, calling an old friend, going to the gym, learning a new skill, taking a walk without needing to check your phone every few minutes. Little by little, your life becomes full again. And something unexpected happens. You stop asking, will they stay? Because your life no longer stops. If they leave. Years ago, Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person's peace should come from within, not from the changing opinions or actions of others. When I first read those words, they sounded almost impossible. Now, I think he was describing exactly this. A life where your happiness isn't fragile, because it isn't being held together by someone else's choices. And maybe that's why people are drawn to those who don't chase. Not because they seem distant, but because they finally look complete. So if the answer isn't chasing, and it isn't pretending not to care, then what does a healthy relationship actually look like? More importantly, how do you love someone deeply, without losing yourself in the process? That's the question we'll answer next. Love should add to your life, not become your life. Can I share something with you? For years, I thought a good relationship meant giving everything you had. Your time, your energy, your attention, your patience. I thought love meant putting someone else first. Every single day. And maybe you've believed that too. But the older I get, the more I realize something. A healthy relationship doesn't ask you to give up your life. It asks you to bring your life into it. There's a huge difference. Think about the happiest couples you've ever met. I'm willing to bet it wasn't because they spent every second together. It was because both people still had a life of their own. They had friends, goals, interests, dreams. They laughed together, but they also knew how to enjoy time apart. That's what makes a relationship breathe. Imagine holding a handful of sand. If you keep your hand open, the sand stays where it is. But if you squeeze as tightly as you can, it begins slipping through your fingers. The tighter you hold, the faster you lose it. People aren't that different. The more someone feels controlled, the more they pull away, the more they feel trusted, the more likely they are to stay. A few months ago, I read about a couple who had been married for over 40 years. Someone asked them the secret. The husband smiled and said, "We never tried to become one person. We spent 40 years becoming better people, beside each other." I love that answer, because it completely changes the way we think about love. The goal isn't to disappear into someone else's life. The goal is to build a life so meaningful that sharing it becomes a gift, not a necessity. Have you ever noticed how attractive confidence really is? I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm talking about the quiet confidence of someone who knows who they are. Someone who doesn't panic when plans change. Someone who doesn't need constant reassurance. Someone who can enjoy your company without making you responsible for their happiness. Those people have something incredibly rare: emotional stability. And emotional stability creates emotional safety. People don't stay because you never make mistakes. They stay because being around you feels peaceful. Not perfect. Peaceful. That's a big difference. I think that's why so many relationships become exhausting. Not because there's no love, but because there's no space. Every disagreement becomes a crisis. Every delayed reply becomes a threat. Every quiet moment becomes something to fear. Eventually, both people stop relaxing. They're no longer enjoying the relationship. They're managing each other's anxiety. And no relationship can survive that forever. There's a simple question I ask myself now whenever I care deeply about someone. Am I loving this person? Or am I asking them to protect me from my own fears? That question is uncomfortable. But it's also incredibly freeing. Because it reminds me that love and dependence are not the same thing. One is built on appreciation. The other is built on fear. Marcus Aurelius believed that every person should learn to stand firmly within themselves before trying to influence the world around them. I don't think that idea only applies to leadership. I think it applies to love too. The stronger your relationship with yourself becomes, the healthier every other relationship in your life can become. Not because you'll stop caring, but because you'll finally stop asking other people to carry the weight of your happiness. And that's one of the greatest gifts you can give someone. To love them deeply, without making them responsible for completing you. So what happens when someone still chooses to leave? Even after you've loved them honestly. Even after you've done your best. That's where most people break. But strangely, that might also be the moment your real healing begins. Sometimes losing someone is how you find yourself again. Can I tell you something that nobody told me when I was younger? Sometimes, the hardest goodbye you'll ever experience is also the beginning of the healthiest version of your life. I know that doesn't feel true when you're in the middle of it. When someone leaves, your first instinct is to figure out how to bring them back. You replay every conversation. You read old messages. You wonder if one different sentence, one different decision, could have changed everything. I've been there. Maybe you have too. And if you have, I want you to hear this. It's okay to miss someone. It's okay to cry. It's okay to wish things had turned out differently. None of that makes you weak. It makes you human. But there comes a moment when the questions have to change. Instead of asking, "How do I get them back?" you begin asking, "How do I get myself back?" That question changes everything. Because healing doesn't begin when the pain disappears. Healing begins when your attention returns to your own life. I remember reading about a man whose wife passed away after more than 30 years together. People expected him to spend the rest of his life talking about what he had lost. Instead, he started volunteering at a local community center. He planted a small garden behind the building. He learned how to paint. He traveled to places they had always dreamed of visiting together. When someone asked him, "How did you move on?" he quietly replied, "I didn't move on. I moved forward." There's a difference. I thought about that for a long time. Because moving on sounds like forgetting. Moving forward means carrying the love without carrying the chains. Maybe that's what many of us need. Not permission to stop loving someone, but permission to stop punishing ourselves. To stop believing that every ending means we failed. Sometimes, people leave because life changes. Sometimes, they leave because they're fighting battles we'll never fully understand. And sometimes, they leave simply because the two of you were never meant to walk the same road forever. That doesn't erase what was real. It doesn't make your memories meaningless. It doesn't mean your love wasn't genuine. It simply means that not every beautiful chapter was meant to become the whole story. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that everything in life is temporary. When I first heard that idea, I thought it sounded depressing. Now I hear something completely different. If every season changes, then this season of pain will change too. Not overnight. Not next week. But it will. One morning, you'll wake up and realize you didn't think about them the moment you opened your eyes. One day, you'll hear a song that used to hurt, and instead of feeling broken, you'll smile. Not because you stopped caring, but because you've finally stopped bleeding. And when that day comes, I hope you don't see yourself as someone who was abandoned. I hope you see yourself as someone who survived. Someone who loved deeply, learned painfully, and grew stronger, without becoming bitter. Because that's a rare kind of strength. Not the strength to hold on forever, but the wisdom to know, when it's finally time, to hold on to yourself instead. Before we finish, there's one final thought I want to leave with you. Not about relationships, not about loss, but about the one person who will stay with you for the rest of your life. You. Maybe you were never meant to chase anyone. Before you leave, I want to ask you one last question. What if the person you've been chasing was never the one you were supposed to find? What if this whole experience was never about them? What if it was about you? About helping you discover where you've been abandoning yourself? Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. The people who truly belong in your life don't need you to become someone else just to keep them. They don't ask you to shrink, to beg, to constantly prove your worth. Real love doesn't make you feel like you're taking an exam every single day. It makes you feel safe enough to be yourself. And if you've never experienced that, please don't convince yourself it doesn't exist. Just because you've been loved the wrong way doesn't mean healthy love isn't real. It is, but it usually begins after you stop chasing it. I know some of you watching this are hurting right now. Maybe someone left. Maybe someone stopped calling. Maybe you're lying awake every night, wondering why you weren't enough. If that's you, I want to tell you something. You were never supposed to measure your value by someone else's ability to recognize it. Think about a diamond. If someone mistakes it for an ordinary stone, does it become less valuable? Of course not. Its value never changed. Only someone's ability to see it. Maybe that's true for you too. Maybe you've spent years trying to convince the wrong people to appreciate what was already valuable. And that's an exhausting way to live. So here's something I'd love for you to remember. Not just today, but every time you feel the urge to chase someone who keeps pulling away, don't ask, "How can I make them stay?" Ask, "Why do I believe I need someone who keeps making me question my worth?" That single question has the power to change your life. Because the moment you stop asking for permission to be enough, you begin living differently. You stop settling. You stop pretending. You stop abandoning yourself. And little by little, you become the kind of person who doesn't need to chase love. Because the love you give yourself becomes the standard for every relationship that follows. Final reflection. Before we end, I want to leave you with a small challenge. Not for next year. Not for next month. Just for tomorrow. The next time you feel the urge to send one more message, to explain yourself one more time, or to beg someone to understand your worth, pause, take one deep breath, and ask yourself, if I truly believed I was enough, what would I do differently right now? Then trust that answer. It might feel uncomfortable. It might even feel lonely. But that's often what growth feels like in the beginning. And one day, you'll look back and realize, the moment you stopped chasing other people was the moment you finally started finding yourself. If this conversation spoke to you, I'd really love to hear from you. Have you ever reached a point where you stopped chasing someone and started choosing yourself instead? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to read it today. And if these conversations help you see life a little more clearly, subscribe to the channel. Every week, we'll talk about real struggles, real emotions, and timeless ideas that can help you build a calmer mind, healthier relationships, and a stronger sense of self. Until next time, take care of your heart, protect your peace, and remember, the right people won't ask you to lose yourself just to keep them in your life.